What is the latest situation from your perspective on the security aspect across the Taiwan Strait?
From the everyday people's perspective, the de facto line in the middle of Taiwan Strait has clearly been broken, and the east of Taiwan is now part of the potential combat zone that will change the entire game plan from the defense perspective. Therefore, people on the streets are now saying that they do not believe the United States will come to Taiwan's aid. The two recent polls have 70% of the people saying that they do not believe the United States will come simply because when PRC started the military drill, the United States have backed off.
Now, we see different political provocations coming from the perspective of China from Washington. For example, Nancy Pelosi's visit and the likely coming into being Taiwan Policy Act 2022, which China suspects the U.S. is going to go even further in trying to using Taiwan as a bargaining chip against China. Now, Ms. Lei, what are the worst scenarios that you see Taiwan needs to be prepared for?
Well, let me say something about Taiwan Policy Act. I think we narrowly escaped a true disaster because the Taiwan Policy Act will change the fundamental of the Sino-American relationship, will change the one China policy from the United States perspective. It proposed to give Taiwan major non-NATO ally status, and also with the direct support of fiscal budgets, it also has a Lend-Lease program attached to it. If that does happen, Taiwan will truly be used as a Queen's Gambit against the PRC by the United States. So we have narrowly escaped that because they have put the discussion on hold. On the other hand, there are still a lot of maneuver and promises that United States is muscling up all their supporters in their camp, starting from NATO and a few countries in Asia, such as Australia and Japan, indicating that their strong support for the United States against so-called mainland China's aggression. However, in every one of those statements, they always maintain the one China policy. So luckily, we're not moving in the direction of China Policy Act that will really tumble the one China policy.
And now there's likely coming up with more, rhetorics of legislative figures coming from the United States visiting Taiwan. Some of U.S. Closest allies also claim that they would like to do so. So how do you see political figures trying to cash out their political capital by using Taiwan as a political tool?
Well, that is why I always believe that there is a very comprehensive playbook, and Nancy Pelosi is only one act of that playbook. Using deniability and personal individual blame are very cheap tricks for politicians to avoid responsibilities if things go bad. Well, if we look at this really long playbook, you have seen Australia and Japan working in concert with the United States in Asia. And you also have seen some discussion about future potential game plans on how China should take or would take Taiwan, especially the ones that's being publicized by a media telegraph in Great Britain. That indicates to me that there are a lot of war game planners. They are planning an eventual war. And in the perspective of the United States, they would like to have a quote unquote small and limited war to break the status quo, to gain further control of the situation, to put China's ascendance economically and regionally at bay. And this long playbook has many, many acts. Pelosi is the beginning of one act.
Then how do you see the reactions coming out of the Taiwan authorities earlier? How the internal debate is going on in Taiwan right now?
Well, the internal debate is really quiet. It's the theory of spiral of silence. The ones who are against DPP's current positions are put to silence because they don't have the right platform to wage real challenge to the DPP position. Let me say a few words about DPP position. It has, at the beginning, worked on the deniability. They said they don't know anything. They were extremely quiet, all very silent. Then when Pelosi landed, it became extremely widely publicized, and there were a lot of high-level words being touted: unwavering support, security, prosperity, governance, and so on and so forth. All of this, Nancy even expressed to Tsai Ing-wen that she does not represent just the House, but the Senate, and not just the Congress, but the United States. So there were a lot of touting. And on the ground campaign level, DPP's candidates for the year-end election have used that to say, look, the United States is supporting us. Don't worry. And that don't worry was broken by the military drill. So they now scramble to find another position. And I truly believe that the United States have put a brake on this. They don't want DPP to further irritate or challenge China by saying United States will come to the aid, because that will drag the United States into a war that they are neither prepared nor want. So now DPP is quite quiet, calling for restoration of peace and stability. They didn't even use strong words to quote unquote condemn PRC's military exercises. So I see a little behind the scene things moving around, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. However, the business community has come out to challenge DPP's position, calling for them to restore peace and restore stability.
How do you see, from your perspective, being a legislator for quite some time and also analyst of international relations, Ms. Lei, about the issue of sovereignty being manipulated and reshaped as if it were an issue of democracy or not, which is mainly choices of political systems?
Well, it has already resulted in miscalculations. I think all the players who designed this playbook realize that they have mistakenly calculated the situation. And it has also threatened the lasting peace and stability across Taiwan Straits, which both people on the mainland China and in Taiwan has worked really hard for. You will have mainland China, United States, and Japan, to say the least, the number 1, 2, 3 economies of the world, all coming into a confrontation. So even if we don't calculate the casualties and cruelty of war, it will bring huge damage to the world economy. The whole world will change. Okay. We are looking at an economic Armageddon, if not a military Armageddon.
We see that playbook somewhat earlier in the last century. For example, the Vietnam War and the war on the Korean Peninsula. Now, it is a war that's closer to Asia. In fact, it's in the middle of Asia, and yet it's far away from the continental United States. And some could argue that it was initiated by the United States, and also, in certain extenses, the US should learn the lesson. But apparently, this playbook has been put in front of us once again, in front of this generation. Ms. Lei, tell me more about your thoughts in retrospect.
Well, compared to the last war, say Vietnam War or Korean War, it was at a time when the United States was the supreme power in the world. And there was also a secret pact between the United States and USSR that they were going to compete worldwide in terms of the systems. There were two systems competing against each other. They agreed to compete system-wise worldwide, but also agreed to wage limited war. So we see Korean War, we saw Vietnam War. The two giants have an agreement that they will not extend the war outside of the limited scope and area. Now it's an entirely different story. China has extremely large economic partnerships around the world. and also a very new build-out of military might. With this, the war cannot be limited, no matter how stupid a strategist was or how imaginative he or she believed that they can be limited. So we're not looking at a potential of a limited war. If that does happen, it will be a very widespread worldwide event. And if we don't call it World War III, we will call it some similar name.
So the question now is, how would Taiwan avoid being used as a bargaining chip, as a starting point of a conflict that no one wants to see? And certainly the interests of Taiwan, of China, is absolutely at the core of it. How should Taiwan do it? What do you think?
The DPP leadership seems to believe that to promote their agenda of Taiwan independence, they have to lean very heavily on the United States and thereby Japan. If that mindset doesn't change, I don't see any hope of Taiwan not being used as a queen's gambit, a pawn, or just simply a chip. There is got to be a change in the top leadership so that they do not believe that they have to rely on the United States and Japan for an independence agenda.
One of the things people were appalled is the lack of basic information and knowledge about the question of Taiwan by many, shall I say, in the US and also in different parts of the world. So, Ms. Lei, how do you see that the fact that in today's world, people tend to debate with very limited facts in mind, but could be ever more opinionated as if they are the truth?
What you described has been widely spread around the Western media. However, I do believe with the current position of PRC in the United Nations and the UN recent announcement that they will support the resolution 2758, this can be resolved officially. What's not resolved is on the mindset, on the zeitgeist of the people, how people see that part of the history, especially from the common people's point of view. It's all a blank. For example, many people understand the atrocity done on the Jewish people. They know Auschwitz, they know those concentration camps, but almost no one knows that Japan really invaded many countries in Asia. If we look at an aggressor and invader, Japan was the only country that massively invaded everyone else. But now they are now being brought in by the United States as a partner in protecting peace, which is a big irony. And if we don't let the world know that who is the true aggressor and how Chinese people have fought Japan and after that have split it into different camps, and how the 1949 situation have come about, then there is no understanding, no sympathy or empathy on the hardship and the bloodshed sacrificed by Asia as a whole, not just China, but China certainly took the brunt of the attack.
So how do you see what's going on the island of Taiwan politically leading up this year and 2 years from now?
Well, last week people say whatever happens to Taiwan, United States will come to our aid, and that's the main political campaign to be used by the end of the year. And 2024, DPP has a very comprehensive playbook on that as well. But this year, I think wherever they go, they will be challenged by people saying that, look, you've promised us support and security. What happens? Why don't we see US responding? Why don't we see Japan responding? I suppose that DPP will call the United States and Japan for their promised support in order to gain that confidence. If things continue to worsen in Taiwan, which I do not hope, but more and more people will start thinking whether those promises, especially by Tsai Ing-wen.
And it depends on what kind of status quo she's talking about. Obviously, her version is very different from what many people have in mind, possibly. Joanna Lei from Taipei, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.